Welcome to part 3 of our course on vernacular architecture. This will be a weekly roundup video that we will do and gather some thoughts and gather the topics that is being discussed in the forum. So this is a way for us to respond to some of your questions and some of your thoughts, and a way for us to also really feel out how you as the learner are understanding the course. So to introduce ourselves, I'm Peter, this is Abdul, Norman, Edwin, and next week we'll be joined by Carol. So the 5 of us will wade through the issues and through the topics that we see popping up in the discussion forum. So please continue to post and to ask questions, and we will pick amongst what we can to discuss here in the Roundup videos each week. So I'd like to just start by saying that we welcome back the learners who joined us for part 1 and part 2. We know that some of you are here for part 3, and we're glad that you continue to join the course. And for anyone who hasn't joined the previous courses, that's fine. We will take you along with us, and hopefully you'll be learning some interesting things that you can use in your everyday life. So we chose a couple of questions and a couple of points from the forum, which I'd like to discuss. And then, as we do in vernacular, sometimes we veer a little bit off course and off tangent, but that's the beautiful thing about vernacular architecture, is that it encompasses a wide range of topics and a wide range of studies and disciplines. So most of the time, it kind of comes full circle back around. One of the things that we always say is that vernacular architecture is not a product. It's not about the now. It's a process. And it's really something that lasts through the ages. And this point is something that we want to address in a few of the different questions. The first post that I'd like to bring up is titled Conflict by Laura Lee M., which she says she sees an increasing conflict between vernacular architecture and human greed. The result used to be largely one of scale, the castle versus the thatched hut. Now, with land at a premium, these are being torn down for more grandiose buildings. So this is something that I think we as students of vernacular architecture are always trying to understand. And this goes back to what I mentioned about how it's not a product but a process. So when we build, as designers and as architects and as people, when we build, we should try not to think about the now and try not to think about 2018 or 2019, but about how this as a process will last through the ages and what this means for identity as the surrounding context changes throughout time, changes politically, environmentally, culturally. So the things that we build need to last. And I think that's one of the key takeaways from this point. I think something that we also thought was interesting is you can consider this somewhat similar to Darwin's survival of the fittest, where these buildings that are still surviving today, they survive for a reason, which is they offer some value. And I think value is something that can be interpreted many different ways.
Yeah, I think one thing that should be brought up is that when we do build, a lot of thought should be put into it. Not just about the materials itself, but what is the meaning behind the materials. I think some of the stuff that was talked about by some of the lecturers was, an object itself is not just, like the pen idea, right? It's not just a pen, but there's a lot of thought that goes into it. The more thought you put into it, the more, the better the product will become. Talking about product, but like the better the object will become. And when it is well thought out, it can survive through decades because people appreciate it, and that's how we should judge our architecture.
And also, I think it's interesting that Professor Howard David brought up the case of in Japan that the 3 houses were sitting together, and the one was built with modern material, and the second one is old, And the third one is also old with a pitched roof, but with some modification of facade. And like he argues that each of the building was represented vernacular at a certain time, but I think we can also look at it in a broader context of the community. So this three house was tell us about the story behind the building. So I think that should be considered as vernacular as well.
Nice.
Right.
And I think this is something that we'll say in every Roundup video is there are issues that really tie together with other issues that are coming up in the next 5 episodes. So each episode, we build on the knowledge that we've learned from the previous episodes. So ultimately, at the end of this course, the goal is that we use all of the knowledge that we learn and we can formulate these thoughts and these concepts about vernacular architecture. So as we introduce these thoughts and these concepts to you, I think you will also develop a more mature and comprehensive understanding of what vernacular architecture is. So I'll move to the next question here, the next topic actually, by Betty Ann, entitled Immigrants. So the question or the topic raised was, I'm wondering if vernacular architecture built by immigrants tends to be simple, inexpensive, and basic, unlike the vernacular building of a people who have been in the same area for many generations. So I found this topic to be super interesting because not only the political climate in many countries now concerning immigration, but because this is something that really affects myself as an expat living in Hong Kong. It also affects you. It affects a lot of people who are living in places where they were not necessarily born, in places that they have grown up outside of their home, you could say. And I think something that we had discussed about this is that the idea of transplanting ideas and fusion is something that is common and is a characteristic of almost every region and almost every place in the world. You have people coming from different areas who have settled in a specific place, bringing their thoughts, bringing their concepts, their culture to this new place, and creating this new melting pot is one of the terms that we use. But this type of thing, for example, Hong Kong, the colonial buildings of Hong Kong, those were not designed by necessarily with the local context in mind. It was designed bringing together ideas from India, bringing together ideas from Europe. So this type of amalgamation does not necessarily exclude some things from being vernacular. It just means that we have to consider there are more factors at play than just what the local people there may be building at a specific time. There's other concepts coming from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think is what's interesting about this course, because when you are simply looking at one building at a particular place, like a shop house in Hong Kong, for instance, you might not immediately identify with the background and what leads to that particular build form. But actually, because of all the cultural fusion that happens over time, colonialism, which could be bad politically, but in another aspect, culturally and also architecturally, the build form that has generated from it is a whole different level of investigation, which we will continue to find out more in the next few episodes.
Yeah. So I think as we go along, we're also talking about these concepts of identity, and what does that mean? There was a point raised by Ak Varma. Actually, let's edit that one out. AKVK Varma. And the question is on identity. And what is identity? The tangible or the intangible? And the first sentence in this point is, an identity can only be understood by a reference to another identity. And I think this is something that is very, very key here when we talk about vernacular architecture. Culture is one of the biggest factors at play here. And identity and sense of place and these two things make up a large portion of how we can identify what value and what is sustainability when we talk about vernacular architecture, is if it has that type of identity. And tangible, intangible, both of these concepts come together to make something that's lasting and has value. Would you agree on that? Would you guys agree on that?
Yeah, I think it's important we gotta understand that vernacular architecture is not just about the building itself, but because the building itself is generated from people's thoughts, people's backgrounds, people's understanding of the environment. That is how vernacular architecture is built on, right? It's not just a building itself. So when you're talking about the tangible and intangible, you have to see these two things work together. And when they work together, then you have what it is, the background story to it.
Mm. Great. Well, I think that about wraps it up for week 1 Roundup video. Before we end, I'd just like to thank Professor Lung again for everything that he's done for this course. And as you go through the weeks, you will see his face a lot, and you will be hearing the concepts and the ideas that he's taught all of us over the years. And we're looking forward to hearing more of his feedback as the weeks go on. So for those questions that were not raised in this Roundup video, please don't be discouraged. We're still monitoring and we're still engaging with you on the forum. And we'll be pulling new concepts and new topics each week. So please continue to post and to answer questions and to engage in your other co-learners' questions, and we will see you next week.